Attending, we have Johan Bergstrom, Michael Dawson, Miles Borens, Brian Graham, and Alexis Campila. So why don't we start with a quick stand-up? We can go through in order, in the same order as the attendees. So Michael.
Sure. I guess I'm thinking build-specific stuff. I had spent a little bit of time discussing with Johan in terms of some of the environment variables we need for the VPC release machines. Still some internal discussions trying to get AIX machines. Best the most concrete answer I have now is, there's a team that's trying to get funding for first quarter of next year. That could result in sort of end of January type availability of some machines from the OSU. We'd be donating more hardware there. I'm still pushing on if there's any other ways we could get some AIX machines in the interim. There are some places like Sitox that support, that have AIX virtual machines, but I'd need to find somebody to fund that. So I'm still pushing forward on that front as well. I think that's about it. I guess unless maybe since the last time I did stitch in the FIPS mode build to the CI, but we can talk about that more in the later agenda item.
Yes, there is an issue. It's part of the agenda item.
Yep.
Okay. Next is Johan.
Sure. I've done a few things. First of all, and most important, I feel, is I took a look at all the issues we've been having with our Jenkins setup in terms of, the timeouts and why attachments doesn't work sometimes. And I kind of tracked it down to being the good old Java GC issue stuff by using JStack and JMap. And I just messed around a bit with how we instantiate Jenkins. And I feel like we've been having it running in production for five days or something now, and I don't know if you've noticed anything, you guys, but for me it's been working heaps better. So hopefully the problems we've been having with Jenkins responsiveness is a thing in the past. I guess the second problem we had, but fixed prior, was that DigitalOcean was running backups like weekly, and every time during those backups, everything was completely unresponsive. So, with those two issues fixed, we should be in pretty good standing.
The JVM machine issues that you fixed, were they affecting slaves or a master or both?
No, it's just the master.
So that's why it was so slow to load pages.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what happened was there was a million threads just watching for incoming logs, streaming them to disks for all the build jobs. And then, like, if I looked at the hot path of all the Java threads, I could kind of see that a few of the threads was just starved. So you had like a constant GC cycle going. We don't have to run into Java. I'd rather avoid it, to be frank. But yeah, I managed to fix it by, first of all, allocating more memory and then doing some ratios in terms of how to delegate that memory. Second, I've been looking at coming up with a consistent naming convention for our hosts. The main reason I want to do this is because I want to use that information in Ansible. So if we have a machine called test, we can kind of use that to our advantage to create roles in Ansible and then install whatever packages necessary. And the same thing applies to other machines such as linting or release machines. It also gives us the benefit of being, for instance, being able to use the type of operating system or architecture to know what init scripts to install and such. I've done a few prototypes locally on machine, and it looks pretty good. I think we're soon at a state where we can drastically simplify our Ansible setup. And I've also looked at creating those roles. I have a branch on my fork of build you can have a look at if you just want to see how the progress is, but I'm not quite ready to do a pull request for it. I've also redeployed a few of our machines, mainly moved a few from DigitalOcean. We've gotten some more space at SoftLayer through Michael. So I'm kind of improving the first of all redundancy, but also the resiliency. So if DigitalOcean has any issues, we'll still have a higher percentage of the cluster being up. And all I essentially do is that every time I do this, I rename it to the new naming convention and I re-add it to the Ansible inventory. So if you just pull the latest repo, you should have the latest names and changes. Another thing I've been working on is improving the way we access these machines. I think that the problem has kind of grown with time because when we started off, we used a script as part of the Ansible setup where we assign trust by fetching keys from GitHub and then adding them to the authorized keys section. But then when we got access to the Joyent stuff and the IBM stuff, we had another set of keys. And then we have another set of keys for release machines and for CI and other infra machines. So if you're one of the lucky few having access to most machines, you will have a very interesting SSH config. So what I proposed was that we reduce the set of keys to a smaller type of keychain. So now we will have 3 types of keys, or 3 types of access levels, rather. One is test, where all of us will have access, and that means that we will have 1 key that lets us access all test machines. So if there's any issues or if the test working group comes to play, we can give them that key, and then they can access all the hosts and either restart Jenkins if there's a problem or just debug or whatever you want to do. Then we have a release type key, which is used to access release machines, and an infra type key, which is used to access the Node.js triple dub or the CI machine as of writing. And I've delegated this by adding a few new subfolders to our secrets repo. Everyone in the build group should have access to that. So if you clone that and let me know, unless you already haven't provided a GPG key, you can then get access to these keys depending on if you're in the release group, for instance, like a few of us are. You can then get access to all these things. I'm kind of refactoring that as well because at the moment it's a bit of a mixed bag, the secrets repo, because we have access to DigitalOcean and Rackspace and similar as part of the test trust, but I think that would probably live better in the infra trust. So there's a bit of refactoring going on and redeploying, but that's progressing nicely.
So the access is restricted beyond the build working group, right?
Yeah, so I would like to expand it to the test working group when that comes to play as well. But that's pretty much the scope of the trust. So we've actually, by doing this, moved into a much better position when it comes to knowing who has access to what.
It might make sense to include benchmarking as one of those categories.
Absolutely.
If there's going to be a few, we have a few machines already around benchmarking, so having having a layer where people in that group could access those machines would make sense.
Cool. I'll create a.
Is that different than testing?
Yeah, I don't know. That they might go together.
In terms of security restriction, I guess.
Yeah, if there's no reason not to say that everybody in benchmarking could have access to test. I'm just thinking benchmarking might be a smaller set than the overall test set.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Again, the less access we have, the better, obviously. That's a security standing point. And I mean, if you look at interest from a benchmarking perspective, they shouldn't really log into test machines and do benchmarks. They should use the benchmark machines. So for me, it makes sense. I'm happy to do that. If someone else, I'll create an issue about it, and we can discuss it there, I guess.
Sure.
And in terms of infra, who has access to infra has access to everything, pretty much, right?
Yeah, so infra is the inner circle, which right now consists of me, Rod, and Joao, and that's mainly based on activity. We've pretty much been the ones that have worked the most with all machines, so that's a starting point. I'm happy to add as we grow, but at the same time, I want it to be really, represent the activity and have a small core. So feel free to stand up.
The only thing on that front I'd wonder is there any way to handle the case where like all three of you guys are away?
Yeah, that's the perfect example of why we need to grow the group.
Right. And also redundancy across time zones.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking more if there was like a way to temporarily give somebody access or something. That might be a useful thing to have considered up front.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, there's ways of doing that in terms of, creating a temporary key through Ansible and just shoving it on there and then doing it that way. That could work, absolutely. But in terms of giving access to the folder in the build repo, just kind of implies that we're going to have to just redeploy all the keys if it's temporary.
Right. Okay.
So, but I think, I mean, obviously, the main objective should be growing the group. I think that's the most important thing. So yeah.
Yeah, and isolating release and infra allows us to grow at least the test group.
Yeah, exactly. There's an ongoing issue about this. Number 254, if you want to chip in. I guess we could talk about benchmarking in there. But it absolutely makes it easier to grow the test group. And if you want to add more groups, it shouldn't be a problem either. It just makes it so much easier because what we also can do now is I can start scripting the Ansible setup, so we can have a command that lets us connect, and we don't even have to mess with our own SSH config. So we can pretty much just have access to the keys through the Ansible setup. Yeah, and then I'll keep it short. Just one more thing. I'm kind of using the FreeBSD deploys as my playground because I know that I'm pretty much the only one working with it. So I've looked at using templating in Ansible instead of using the way we replace everything. So hopefully coming to all deploys will have a much smaller playbook and much simplified. And I guess doing the access thing also removes a few lines in there. So the scripts will be pretty short in the coming weeks. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Next, myself, Alexis. I did deliver a proposal for the module build service, issue 151. We did some studying and prototyping, myself and Joao, on how to go about it. If you're interested, please go read the issue and comment. We're hoping to get some feedback before we proceed with the prototype. But the idea is to deliver something that will build native modules on behalf of users on selected platforms, starting with Windows first, probably, because it's the most problematic. And to deliver something that can do this as soon as possible, so within a few months, not years.
Do we think the infrastructure is going to be, like, is it going to be platform specific?
Well, parts of it, like there would be like a RESTful web service that doesn't have to be platform specific, but then when you need to build for each, on behalf of each client platform, right, you need to match what the client has.
Right.
We're not going to enable all the platforms, but we say we enable Windows and OS X, that we're going to need slaves to build on Windows and OS X.
Right, but for example, if it's just doing the same as an npm install, you'd think that the key components could be platform neutral, and as long as you have an npm install working on a particular platform, they should work. It would then just be a matter of providing a slave which has all the right bits of the compiler and all the environment set up.
Right, so the slave needs to be platform specific.
Right, but I'm thinking, whatever you develop, I'm thinking we could do it in a way where to support a new platform should just be configure a platform with the right compilers and all that, and then install the same components.
Yes, that's the idea. I mean, the service will be generic, and it will be built in Node.js and Express, probably.
Right, okay. So yeah, is that, okay,
yeah,
good.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to use, what this group is proficient with. So Node.js, Express, MongoDB to build the service, and then have a standard way of spin off the slaves that can also be configurable, because there might be scenarios in which people want to spin off these slaves inside enterprise walls, or we're going to spin them in a cloud. So that part will be extensible.
I'm just thinking that, what would be a good lowest bar is if you have a platform and npm install works, then the rest of this stuff works as well without having to do anything special.
Yes, although that's the devil is in the details. In that, getting that npm install to work can be problematic.
Right, but all that should be sort of outside that should be slave setup, right?
Right. The service will just have an interface towards the slave to just start an environment and shut it down when it's done, basically.
Right.
And launch the npm install job.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Yes. Please feel free to pitch in the issue. I don't know if it's going to belong to the build working group, but for now it's in the build repo. And as soon as we're going to start prototyping, we're going to create a repo somewhere and do all of this in the open, and also call for help if anybody's interested.
Yeah, I'll just be interested that, once there's something to run, trying to run it on some of the other platforms, like, say, for example, AIX, just to make sure it works there too.
Yep. Okay. Next, I did some emergency maintenance on Jenkins. We have an issue with the multi-job plugin and snapshots. V8 snapshots don't run with ARM because we're cross-compiling there. There's an issue open about this. And then Joao was not present today. He finally fixed the disconnects that were plaguing Jenkins for so long. So that was a great step forward in the reliability. And that's it for my stand-up. Next is Miles.
Hello. So I've gotten further with the work on Canary and the Gold Mine. It's fully unit tested now, and there's one pull request left to get reviewed that adds a new binary that just allows you to run all of the modules that are in a single manifest. So just simplifies what needs to be done in continuous integration. Started playing with some of the CI jobs to just kind of see what that looks like, but I didn't get super far. There's been a few other things I've been working on as well, but I think the big thing for me will be, getting a CI job up and running that we can use for doing smoke testing against specific commits.
Great. Let us know if we can help.
Yeah, so I won't get into the technical stuff too much now, but if someone from the group who has more experience wants to maybe just pair with me for an hour or two, that'd probably save me a lot of time.
Sure. Between myself, Johan, or Joao, I think we're the ones who played with the Jenkins scripts the most.
Okay, cool. So I'll discuss that offline. We'll figure out a time that works.
Sounds good.
Cool. That's everything from me right now.
Next is Ryan.
I haven't done a huge amount. I was something piqued my interest at the end of the last meeting was SSH support on Windows. So I did some looking into that and seeing what's involved in actually getting that to work for getting Jenkins to use SSH to connect to Windows. Turns out the SSH plugin makes quite a few assumptions about the host environment, so it requires more than just SSH. So I haven't.
Is this to get Jenkins to connect to the slaves?
Yeah, this is running an SSH daemon using Microsoft's port of OpenSSH, running on Windows with key-based auth. So that part works. But then when Jenkins tries to connect to it, it runs a handful of Unix commands that do not exist.
Yeah, I know Joao has experimented with this, and he's sort of got it working with Cygwin.
Yeah, Cygwin would probably give in or fill in a bunch of the missing parts for it. I was trying to do it without Cygwin at all, because Cygwin just being present on a machine sort of changes the way it behaves for certain tasks.
Right. So, running Jenkins with SSH? I mean, why do you think that would be beneficial? I know of one reason at least, that we can connect multiple masters to the same slaves
Yeah,
without
it
running
also,
multiple slaves.jar.
it also removes the need for Jenkins to be listening for connections.
Right.
So it doesn't have to accept any, was it JNLP or whatever? Which was the source of the big security scare that happened just before our last meeting.
I see. Yeah, so Windows is the only platform where we don't know how to do it, basically, yet.
Yeah,
I guess
pretty much
one
everything
thing,
else is SSH.
one reason we looked into it as well was because we were having all the timeout issues, which I guess now are actually resolved by lowering the timeout of the polling. Joao initially lowered it to 2 seconds, which redeemed most of the issues we've had. But I saw in some cases that it was slightly too low, because if you get a ping timeout and then it sends a new ping and that doesn't respond in time, it actually flags the slave as offline. So I increased it to 5 seconds, and it looks like it's much better now.
Right. So that was, I think, the only thing related to build that I've been working on. So.
Great. Okay, then let's move forward to the issues on the agenda. The first one is 199, option to run the V8 test suite.
Right, so I guess I can give an update on that. Brian Leung from working on the same team as I do, he's been doing some work on that. He had something which he's run some tests in terms of our internal builds, but he was just putting together a pull request that would apply against master to show how that would work. I think there's still a few issues to discuss in terms of, it's got a limitation where if you update the code in your node install, it won't necessarily automatically pick that up. But I'm thinking within the next day or two there should be a PR submitted that people can take a look at and comment on those kind of things for.
Okay, great. Then we'll look forward to that PR.
Yeah.
Should we keep this issue on the meeting agenda?
I think that makes sense, because once that's accepted, then we're going to need to talk about, or we could talk about it now, like, how we want to actually run that and when, because we'll need to set up some build jobs to do that.
I see. So this is something that we're going to want to do for V8 upgrades, I suppose?
Yeah, like at minimum, we'll want some CI jobs that you could run if you're changing V8. Like applying forward porting a patch or something, backward porting a patch. And I guess we could even consider, depending on how long it runs. Now, it does run fairly long. I think we're probably looking 20-30 minutes. If we want to run that at some interval other than just when people are doing those particular upgrades, like once a release or I don't know what.
Yeah, it's easy to put things on a cron schedule, for example.
Yeah, like we could run them once a day, once a week, or I don't know, whatever we think makes sense in terms of those kinds of things.
Yeah, we could also add it as a subset of nodes. We have an option now in the test commit job to specify which subset of tests we want to run.
Yeah, that might be a nice one where, so for any commit, you could say, hey, I know I'm making some things that affect V8 directories, click the button.
Right, so run V8 test for this one as part of a single run.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds very useful.
Great. We'll revisit that when the PR is ready.
So yeah, we could take this off the working group agenda anyway until it gets, until we have something, and then perhaps bring it back to discuss those.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to get a weekly update.
Yep.
Even if it's just a snooze.
Yeah, sure.
I've been doing some thinking on this as well, and my initial thought was to run it as part of a kind of a nightly suite. We're already baking nightly, so it's always good to get some kind of, state of the nightly. in where we run benchmarks against it, and we run perhaps a more verbose test suite. But at the same time, if it takes 20, 30 minutes on a pretty beefy machine, it doesn't make any sense to run it consistently if it hasn't changed. So I guess we could perhaps even like look at running it, and if it hasn't changed, let's just not run it.
Yeah, I think you maybe would want something smart enough, because like having it as part of the job where you can select it is great, but it doesn't mean that people always will. So I agree that the nightly one, if it was smart enough to say, oh, I see V8 changed tonight, I better run it, that would be quite good.
Yeah, it's I kind of like the idea of having further regression tests running against a nightly. I'm looking at adding covariety tests to a nightly routine as well.
Yeah.
And the same applies there. I mean, it doesn't make sense to spend 20, 30 minutes on something if it's the same as the previous one.
Right. The only flip side to that, though, is that when you have intermittent issues, you actually will uncover more of those if you're running them every day. Even if it hasn't changed, there may be some latent issues that, it's 1 out of 10. So just by running it often enough, you start to uncover those.
Right, we have enough hardware to do this. Maybe not nightly, but every few days.
Yeah, exactly. If it comes down to, if the machines aren't being used for something else, I would vote for just doing it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important point. We are pretty much idle throughout the entire set of slaves. The only slaves we know will spend time is Windows and ARM, and we don't necessarily have to, use them for this. So there's a lot of CPU cycles to be spent if you want to.
Yeah, probably on weekends is where we get less usage, so we could do things weekly on weekends.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I find lots of sort of the intermittent things just by having them run regularly.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, we'll look forward to an update and the PR, and then we can configure Jenkins to do this on a maybe weekly basis. Okay, the next issue is PPC platforms as part of the standard release. Issue 205, I guess, Michael, this is you again.
Yeah, that one I'm just, I added that because I just want to know if there's anything I can do to help move that forward, and just have it as an update. I think Rod and Joanne have been pretty busy getting our 10 and 12 up to spec. So I understand why we haven't made any progress on that, but I would like to sort of keep it up front as one of the things we're trying to work on.
Yeah, no, so we actually, by accident, I mean, the fact of having it in there is already pretty much, dealt with. It's more getting it into play, and we added it to the release job, and when we cut the last 5x release, it was actually part of it. And that's where we found the issues with the environment flags. So it's a matter of modifying the IO.js release job. So we shouldn't be too far off. Let's keep in touch there, Michael, and try to land it within a week.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another issue on the agenda. It's add FIPS mode build to CI, issue 246.
Right. So that one, we recently done some work to make it so you could run the tests when Node is built in FIPS mode. And during part of that, there was several people had asked, well, hey, can we run the regression tests? I'd already had it in mind that this is an important next step after we got that stuff in. So I've added the job to run in FIPS mode and actually stitched it into the regression job for one platform. But I added it here just to see if we could come to close on the discussion on, how many platforms do we think we should cover? The sort of downside is it's like another build on a platform. So, for example, on Ubuntu, you have to run 2 jobs versus one that was there before. So I was reluctant to just turn it on everywhere for fear of, stretching out the regular build.
This is something that we're not releasing as part of the official releases, right? Something that you need to build yourself.
That is right.
Do we have
I
any
mean, I think
data on how many people are using this or the demand for it?
there's been on the discussion items, I'd say there's been like 5 or so people who've been asking about it. In terms of the recent discussions, there's at least 1 or 2 people outside of us who are, were saying, hey, this doesn't work. I tried to do npm installs. That didn't work in that mode. So there's a few other people. I know that internally, our Bluemix platform has requested that we provide them with a FIPS-capable build. And it's important to federal type customers where they have a requirement, so governments and so forth actually have requirements where they need to use FIPS-based cryptography.
And how likely are changes in the Node repo to break this build?
In terms of so that's where, the reason why I think having one platform gets us a fairly good part of the way, in that I think it's less likely that changes are going to only affect a single platform. But there certainly could, changes could certainly affect Node. So if somebody introduced another use of, say, MD5, for example, because they want some unique value or something like that, that would break FIPS mode. So anything that introduces a dependency on the FIPS crypto that isn't allowed, crypto that isn't allowed under FIPS would break it, as well as if people are adding new tests. There's certain interfaces and key sizes and all that kind of stuff. So it's possible people could add a test that wouldn't pass in this mode, and unless we're building it, they wouldn't know that.
But it should affect all platforms equally, you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, if we had unlimited resources, it'd be great to do it across platforms. The other thing, too, is that the FIPS support that was added is only for Linux at this point. So it doesn't support Windows. There'd be needed to be some more work to support a Windows config. And so there's some restrictions that way as well. And in terms of claiming FIPS compliance, it has to be, what we're building, you couldn't actually ship and claim FIPS compliance. You'd have to do extra steps because you need a trusted path for the source code of the FIPS canister and all that. But in addition to that, there's some limitations in terms of compilers and environments. You can't just take just any environment and claim that it's going to be FIPS capable. Linux and some variants of Linux, I think, are the ones that they actually do the evaluations for, and Windows, I think, as well, but we just don't have the actual mechanics to build in the Windows in that particular mode yet. I think the net is that, most likely, 99% of the time, something that breaks is likely to break across the platforms.
Good, so we're probably in a good place already.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, so go ahead.
I was going to say, if we, to get all the tests to work in FIPS mode, that means no use of MD5, just in general. Doesn't that also mean that we don't test MD5?
Well, what we've done is it actually, when you build in FIPS mode, it will, and then run the tests, it will run them in a FIPS capable way. If you build normally, it will build them the way it always has and run the tests in the way they used to. Now, in some cases, based on feedback from Shigeki and so forth, we upgraded the crypto so it'd be stronger key sizes, but we never removed anything that said, test MD5. So those tests are still there if you're running in non-FIPS mode.
All right, so the tests themselves have been flagged as
they basically
FIPS or non-FIPS, basically.
There's a way in some of the tests where they actually have a check that says, am I built in FIPS mode? If yes, do this. Otherwise, do something else. Yeah.
All right.
And
what I was sort of getting at was if the tests don't test anything that's not in FIPS mode, then maybe FIPS should be the default. But that's a much bigger discussion about deprecating a bunch of things.
Right. The other discussion that is going on that's related to that thought is that the way it seems like, I guess, tradition or often in other languages FIPS is done is that the FIPS build is the default, but FIPS mode off is also the default. So although you're built in the FIPS capable mode, it's not turned on. So we are looking at a PR to add a flag that lets you turn it on At which point you could then, we might think of saying, well, let's make the default build FIPS capable, but not turn it on. You'd still need the two test jobs, one which says, well, okay, run it, test it in the default mode, but then also have another one that tests it when it's turned on. But it's kind of along the lines of what you were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds like a decision that has implication beyond just the scope of the build team, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yes, definitely.
More for the crypto team, probably, and the CTC.
Yeah, I think that one, once the flag's in, we might raise that discussion and get it going. The first thing we want to just do is get it in there so that people can use it in that way, because it seems to be the way they're familiar with it on other languages. So yeah, I think the net is, I'm kind of, I don't think there's been any feedback from anybody else in the crypto group on that item. From my perspective, if we had unlimited resources, I might do more, but I think given that we don't want to impact builds too much, this is, what we currently have is probably reasonable. I just chose, Ubuntu 14 arbitrarily and added that one, I don't know if a different platform would make more sense because we have more of them. That might be one consideration, but.
Yeah, Johan, do we have redundancy on Ubuntu 14.04?
Yeah, I'm actually adding another one just today. I was supposed to do it a few days ago, but I haven't gotten to it. So, I mean, the redundancy is probably not a big issue here. It's just how we decide to call it. Like, if we stick to, my take is that, if we do build testing and make sure we don't break anything, that's a good starting point. And that's something we already have in there today. So I'm pretty happy with keeping it that way.
Okay, so it sounds like everybody's comfortable with the state of things. So I guess we can remove the working group agenda label.
Yep, I can just add some comments that say, this is what we discussed. This is, unless anybody objects, we're just going to leave it as is and close it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So that was all the issues we had on the agenda. We have 10 minutes left. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up, or we could do a quick review of the last meeting?
Yeah, two quick things. First of all, I went through our issues and PRs a few days ago, and we have a lot of things that are growing stale, especially in the PR department. So if you have any open PRs in the build repo, just have a quick look and do whatever you can to move them to close, because now that things will start moving with the Ansible repo, we already have things in there that are going out of play. So have a look at that. And the second thing is that I also actually added a slave that is intended to run debug builds of Node, which we've been talking about for a while. And I'm also not sure where to actually hooking in, because running the test suite is probably 5 times as slow as the regular test suite, and it also requires a bit more hardware. So I've added a slightly beefier VM to run it. So if you have any thoughts and ideas on where to integrate that, just let me know.
Well, I did this. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's, maybe that's what you were already mentioning, but that's like an ideal candidate for a nightly or weekly job.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
I built a similar prototype before, and it was an argument in the regular test commit job that would run the whole test suite on all the slaves in debug mode.
So I think that's good too, right? Because if somebody's making something that affects that, but then scheduling something where that's done regularly is probably still useful.
Yeah. The problem is that it would just take forever to run on slower hardware. I mean, on my tests, a test that would take 0.1 seconds now took 1.6 or 7. So just launching Node is insanely much slower, and then just running each test, which is roughly around 1,000, would just take forever. So it's not like we would really have some parallelism issues if we chose to do this. So.
Right, but this is one case where we would want to do it on all platforms, right? Not just one.
Yeah, I mean, my plan was to expand the group of workers in the job. So I'm looking at adding a SmartOS one and a FreeBSD one just to represent that, and then we can probably look at adding a Windows one, and at least by doing so, we have a bit of hardware running, being able to run it. So that could be one way, but just I'm not sure how to tackle the ARM stuff. So yeah.
Well, I guess my suggestion is that this job would end up looking so similar to the Node test commit jobs.
Yeah.
So we might as well build it into those ones.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess you already have the concept of a set of platforms to run it on, right?
Exactly. So we could have a restricted set of platforms, like quick small tests, and then you can choose to run debug on a smaller set of platforms.
Yeah, I simplified the way we invoke GCC 41 and 44 from libuv yesterday, so we don't have to have duplicate slaves for that. So we can actually use a similar solution for this, where we have a label attached to a specific node if we wanted to execute debug builds. And then we can just check for that label if the debug argument to the job is called.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll create an issue about it.
Because I think we're going to want to do more and more of these things. Like I know another thing that I'd like to get some work going on our front is Node as a shared library. So it's another case where and then of course it would be good to have some regression testing on that as well. So I can just see we're going to end up with more and more of these cases where FIPS, where the debug we want to run, maybe not in every regression test, but at a regular interval to make sure we've got good coverage.
Yeah.
Right. Jenkins doesn't make it very easy to reuse the structure and the logic of the jobs.
No, I guess that it's possible to externalize some of that, right? If you put it into, say, scripts that we stored in GitHub, you can start to reuse those, right?
Yeah. Well, you can use scripts in Jenkins jobs, but you cannot use. Well, you can reuse jobs also, but it's not trivial.
Yeah.
So I guess the least amount of jobs we have, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Because all of these are more or less, try to solve the same problems: how to run the same thing on multiple platforms, how to run it with different parameters. So if we can put all that logic in one job and then maybe invoke it with a few different entry points that simplify certain scenarios, I think that might be a good approach.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's create an issue about it. I think it covers a few of the things we've been talking about, and also, I just wanted to add to this that a big corner of tests we're not running is against shared libraries. It's something we've been supporting for a long time. I used to have a closer look at it, but I'm falling out of date, and it's actually, I think a huge part of the community is running it at least against a shared OpenSSL, because most distributions want their own security audits, and also probably a shared sedlib. So it's something we really need to test.
We don't even build that, do we?
No, that permutation doesn't exist in our build environment now, and it's something that we really should be testing. I have a VM, local VM, where I run things like Arch Linux and Gentoo, just because it's super simple to build those dependency chains, and that's the way I'm kind of keeping it up to date, especially through Gentoo, since I'm the one part of the package management there. But it's still something we should make more visible in the build suite if it breaks, because we've broken it a few times, and we've broken the build a few times for permutations on shared libraries.
It's probably worth an issue listing all those things that we should be adding them for.
Yeah, it's actually, we have an old issue about this.
Okay.
I found it this weekend when I was kind of cleaning the repo, and that's when I added the debug builder as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because some of them would be relatively straightforward, right?
Yeah, no, the thing we need to do for shared is pretty simple. We just need to make sure that the libraries installed on that machine are, either the same version or newer than the thing we have bundled in our repo, and then we just need to provide the path to it, and that's it.
Right, and I guess it's do we need anything more than one platform to validate that on? Is that,
No, I don't think so. I'd be happy with one.
Okay.
Okay, so how do we make progress on this issue? You said there's already an issue in GitHub, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's on me, so I'll just, it's on my to-do somewhere. I'll go through it when there's time. So yeah.
Okay, that sounds good enough. Okay, it's 4:58 or 58 minute, whatever time you guys are on.
I guess the only other thing were the issues that Rod had added in terms of, I don't know if we have time to talk about those at all.
I'll include Node.js and nan in Jenkins. Oh, I kind of missed those.
And the question
I know. Yeah, you go.
I was going to ask that he also mentions MIPS. Do we have no MIPS hardware at all?
I have a MIPS machine that was donated by Tesla2. That's in my office. Yeah, it's a bit of a discussion. I think there's an issue somewhere about it. If there isn't, I'll create one. It has similar problems that ARM has, which is the hardware is obviously extremely limited, but this is just and then some. So running the test suite isn't feasible, especially the way you deploy on the Tesla2. But build testing is something we can do, and just by having this, I've been able to look at how they build Node and come with suggestions on the build scripts and look at like upstreaming a few of the patches from V8 and stuff. So that's at least good.
Because I know that they actively maintain V8. We have some contacts with them through our PPC port. So, like, if we wanted to push it, I could see if the team that's doing the V8 ports has any interest in trying to facilitate hardware or whatever. I mean, it's sort of like, is it something we want to try and push, or is it
Yeah. So we have a hardware group. Which is supposedly looking into the microcomputing of Node, and I'd be happy to have them as similar relationship as we have with Docker and soon the test stuff. But for now, I think it should live with us until that group is kind of assembling. Sure. I just think it's resources based. I don't think either of us is in a great position to carry that. But it's definitely something I think should be part of it, and it's because Node is really traveling down those lanes, and it's going to be big with Raspberry Zero or whatever it's called. So I really think we should have that covered.
So I mean, on the MIPS front, you want me to just send them an email and saying, hey, are you interested in providing hardware or anything like that, or should we just leave it till the hardware group ramps up?
I'm happy with either choice. I mean, if it's good to have a yes in an email, I guess. So that doesn't hurt.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize for not adding those issues to the meeting agenda. We'll keep track of them either with GitHub issues or we'll bring them up at the next meeting. So it's the end of the hour. So the next meeting would be in 3 weeks from now. That would be December 22nd, if that's a reasonable date given the Christmas holidays.
Yeah, I'm going to be away for Christmas, but. Okay.
Well, we'll follow the same procedure of creating the issue a few days before, and then we'll see if people are available or we should reschedule to after the holidays. So that's all for now. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, man.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
See ya.